We're going to start tonight with a situation that developed just a few hours ago. It's an event that truly changes the political map of an entire continent, and, it's all still unfolding. We're just going to walk through what's happened very plainly and very carefully. So, here's the central fact. Just after dawn on January 4th, a plane landed in New York. On that plane was the president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro. He is now in the custody of United States federal agents. Everything else that's happening right now stems from that single, confirmed event. The key people involved here are President Maduro and his wife, Cilia Flores. They were taken into custody together by U.S. forces. Over in Washington, the U.S. President, Donald Trump, has officially announced the action. And what that means for Caracas, well, it leaves the government there in a state of immediate and pretty profound uncertainty. What's changed, really, from yesterday to today is the whole nature of who's in charge in Venezuela. The established leadership is literally no longer in the country. And the United States has publicly said that it will now oversee the nation's affairs. So the old way of things, it's just gone. Now, of course, something this big didn't just happen in a bubble. It has instantly become an international crisis, and the world's attention is shifting to the global stage to see what happens next. What we're really watching here is one sovereign nation directly intervening in the leadership of another. An action like this is, it's exceptionally rare, and it has these huge implications. In fact, an emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council has already been scheduled for tomorrow, January 5th. The reason this moment feels so critical is because it's a complete and sudden break from the way things were. For the millions of people in Venezuela and for governments all across South America and the world, the rules that everyone was playing by just a day ago, they just don't seem to apply anymore. To really understand how big of a shift this is, I think it helps to just rewind for a second. Let's reconstruct the world as it was just before this all happened, just to get our bearings. So before today, Nicolas Maduro was the president of Venezuela. He was physically in the country, leading the government from the presidential palace. The political movement, Chavismo, held most of the power in the government. The national economy, it was under a lot of strain, sure, but it was functioning. Society had a rhythm, an established order. And while there were obviously huge tensions between Venezuela and the U.S., a direct military move to remove the head of state, that just wasn't the accepted reality. The power relationship was clear, even if it was really tense. You had a government in Caracas, led by Maduro. You also had a political opposition, and some countries, like the U.S., saw them as the legitimate alternative. But between those two sides, there was always this fundamental line, the principle of national sovereignty. That line has now been crossed. So what was the first reaction from inside the Venezuelan government? The first public response came from the Vice President Delcy Rodríguez. She went on state television and said the arrest was a kidnapping. She called it a brutal attack on Venezuela's territorial integrity and demanded the immediate release of President Maduro and Cilia Flores. She was very clear, stating that Maduro is still the only president of Venezuela. Does the United States have a clear plan for what happens next? That's really the central question right now. President Trump has said that the U.S. will run Venezuela, but he didn't say how or for how long. It implies some kind of direct administration, but we have no details about the structure or the timeline or even the goal of that administration. But I heard there were some conflicting reports, something about the vice president cooperating. Is there any clarity on that? Yeah, and this is a key point where things get confusing. In a press conference, President Trump said that his Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, had spoken with Vice President Rodríguez and that she had expressed a willingness to cooperate with the U.S. in this new phase. This completely contradicts her public statements where she's been completely defiant. So right now we have two totally different stories being told. Okay, so to really understand how we got to this point, we need to trace the events exactly as they happened. And it all kicked off in the very early hours of January 3rd. The first thing that happened was a raid carried out by United States forces. In the dark, before dawn, they entered a residence and arrested President Maduro and his wife, Cilia Flores, reportedly right in their bedroom. From there, they were taken away from the capital. The next confirmed event we know about happened the next day. On the morning of January 4th, the plane carrying both of them touched down in New York. The Venezuelan head of state was now on American soil, in custody. And once they were on the ground in New York, you could really see the scale of the operation. Footage from the tarmac shows Maduro being escorted across the runway by a huge security detail. It was made up of at least 36 agents from both the FBI and the Drug Enforcement Administration, the DEA. So when did the world actually find out this was all happening? when were the official announcements made?
Well, the announcements unfolded almost at the same time in two different countries. In the U.S., President Trump made the first official statement confirming the arrest, and at almost the exact same time in Caracas, as the news started to leak out, people began rushing to stores to buy food and essential supplies, getting ready for a period of real instability. It was then that the remaining Venezuelan government, through Vice President Rodríguez, declared what it called a state of international emergency. And so, that's how we got here. We're now in a new and completely unresolved reality. The actions of the last 48 hours have created a situation where there is no clear path forward at all.
So the crucial thing is this. What we know for certain right now is that a nation's sitting leader is in the custody of a foreign power. The constitutional line of succession in that country is now being actively fought over, both inside and outside the country. In the international community, its institutions, its markets, they're only just now starting to figure out what all of this even means.
The world that existed before this event, it's gone. And the world that comes next hasn't taken shape yet. So the question that's just hanging over everything is, what happens when the established rules of national sovereignty are suddenly and forcefully just pushed aside